Hi there, everyone. My name is Claire Auchmuty. I'll say the surname because it's a bit of a hard one. And I'm delighted to be here today to be part of this presentation for the Divorce Coach Academy conference. And divorce, as we all know, is multifaceted and it's very complex. So I have chosen today to look at the idea of understanding the impact that grief has on a divorce journey. So this is something I didn't understand when I was going through my divorce journey, didn't really know what it meant, didn't create a connection. And so I thought this topic, because of what I wish I had known and the difference it would have made, was something that I'd love to talk about today. So the objectives for this presentation today, I would hope that by the end of this presentation, you would understand a definition of grief, losses, different types of losses on a divorce journey, the Kubler-Ross cycle for grief and change, the importance of a support team, and the ability to support somebody that's actually on this journey. And this is what I hope that you'll get at the end of it. So we'll start with the definition. So the dictionary definition of grief, there's lots of different ones, but the clearest, simplest one that I could find was, it's the experience of coping with loss. And loss always brings change. So really, it's the experience of coping with loss and change in our lives, in whatever form that happens to look like. So I thought I would share a little bit about me and about my experience of loss, just to give you a background of my understanding of this as a concept and a topic and my lived experience. So my background is that I'm from the south of Ireland. I was a nurse and I was married for 19 years to a church minister. So when I began to realize that our marriage wasn't really working for me and that I wasn't able to create a situation that seemed to improve it, and what we tried together didn't really make a difference. When I stepped out of my marriage, I stepped out of being a wife, which is all I had known for 19 years. I stepped out of being a minister's wife, which was a different role entirely because I was part of a church community. And I stepped out of the church support system. So I lost an awful lot in just that one section. Because of the nature of a church marriage, we lived in a house that belonged to the church, which came with my ex-husband's job. So effectively, I lost my home too. I had to set up a new home for me and our boys. So that was all things that happened in January in 2016. And 3 weeks earlier, I had changed my job from being part of the management team from an A&E department where I had been working for 10 years to that of training to be a respiratory nurse in a GP practice. So effectively, I had lost my work support team at the same time because I had changed role and gone into a job that I really didn't know anything about. And that horrible feeling of not having a clue how to do this. So as if that wasn't enough, about 11 months later, my mum tragically died in an accident. My dad was on an undiagnosed dementia pathway at the time, 5 hours away in Galway. So suddenly I lost my mum. My role of being a daughter switched dramatically in an instant into that of being a carer for my dad. And my world went upside down again. So I kind of think I have a bit of a t-shirt in understanding loss and the grief journeys, because I remember clearly at that time when mum died and I was driving to Galway. It was the day after I found out. And I remember thinking and saying to God, I have no idea how to put more loss into my world. It is beyond my capacity. So what I did in my head was I put stuff in suitcases and filed them on shelves way back because I didn't know what else to do. My capacity was maxed out. And at that moment in time, my dad needed my input and my care, and this needed my attention. That's just to give you an overview of my experience of loss and what it can be like. So let's have a look at different losses that are experienced on a divorce journey. There's the loss of your partner, the loss of your life partner, the person who is your safe place, the person who is your cheerleader, the person who is there to pick you up when you fall, to be able to discuss problems with, to get up in the middle of the night to try and sort out things. That person leaves your life. You lose part of your identity, because your identity is being a wife. And as I said, mine was partly being a minister's wife. So my identity was wrapped up in lots of different things. And because I changed my job at the same time, there were lots of facets to my identity that were all interlinked, and they were all big losses. We lose part of family because when you have a divorce, it is absolutely natural that our families support us. So our partner's family support them and our family support us. It is more unusual than it is usual to have in-laws reach over to help you. It does happen, but it's not the normal. And I think a lot of this is to understand that your expectations are best placed in somewhere that's reality, which is difficult to do when you have a relationship with someone you think, we get on really well, and she supports me and she sees what I do. But it's not the same thing when the rubber hits the road. You know that phrase that says blood is thicker than water? Well, that's very often what happens. And then you might lose cousins, as in your children might lose their cousins because they're connected to your partner. So they'll still be in the world when they're with your partner, but they will not possibly be in your world when they're with you. That's a big loss. Your world suddenly shrinks right down. Your security, you lose your home. So in my case, I left my home. But what happens if you have to sell your family home? What happens if you want to hold on to the family home at all costs and your partner wants you to buy them out and you're desperately trying to find the money to do that? I would come with the question and go, what is it about the home that's so important? Because sometimes it is this ability for us to think, I can't cope with more loss. I need to have some stability. But actually, when you look at the financial cost of trying to take on a mortgage to the property that you own, that can be so overwhelming that that's not in your best interest. So I always ask my clients to put a question into the notes in their phone. And it is this in my best interest? Because I think that's a very empowering question to help to cut through the noise of the logic that we have to make better decisions. Our finances, we lose our financial security of whatever we had expected, because maybe in 4 years' time the mortgage would be paid off. Maybe your partner was going to retire in 2 years' time and get a lump sum. All of these things, these are massive things. And when we lose our financial security, that destabilizes us. Or maybe I should say that completely destabilized me, and I presume everyone's like me, because setting up again at this age and stage as a single mom with 2 boys, that was a tough journey. And our boys were 4 and 6 at the time. We lose a lot of our friends because when we start a divorce journey, we raise up all sorts of issues in everybody around us. We raise up uncomfortableness. We raise up people around us that look at us and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's been brave enough to do that. I wish I was brave enough. We have no idea what goes on behind the doors of the lives of our friends. And when we step out into a journey that's what we feel is either our best or it's been forced on us, it raises up all sorts of things. So our friends don't know what to do. And in life as humans, when we don't know what to do? We step outside it because we don't want to be uncomfortable. So we don't contact people. We don't want to stay chatting to them in the street for too long, because what if their partner walks past and we feel uncomfortable? But when you're on a divorce journey, you feel so alone and you feel like you've lost so much. There's no capacity to think about somebody else. So this is a big, big part of losses that we experience on this journey. We can lose our social support. So I've said that I was a minister's wife. I didn't expect any of the parishioners in the parish to support me because my ex-husband was their minister and he deserved their support. But what it meant for me was I lost a huge chunk of my life. And also, they didn't need to know what the cause was, what the reason were. That wasn't information that needed to be shared. But what if your partner played golf and you used to go to the golf club quite a bit and you would go to socials and you would be on the committee for raising money? What happens then? So you lose support, social support in lots of different places and lots of ways. If you're on the PTA in your children's school and your ex-partner might be on the board of governors, well, that can cause a problem. So there's lots of areas where this can impact. You lose a sense of trust because the person you once trusted with your life, what happens then is they're not that person anymore. So our ability to trust ourselves to make good decisions is questioned, and our ability to trust other people is also questioned at the same time. So you can kind of see how that destabilizes us. And we lose our hopes and dreams, our hopes for the future, our dreams for the future, things we'd planned to do in retirement, things we'd planned to do when the kids got up. So I think that's a fairly inclusive list. Of course, there's more. If you have pets, who gets the pet? There's lots of things, but this is just to give you an idea of the enormity of things that we experience when we're on a divorce journey. And a lot of what I'd love to do today is to help you to be able to help somebody else if they're on a divorce journey, if it's somebody that you work with, if it's a friend, that you have an understanding of what are they actually going through. Because it's hard for us to put ourselves in positions whenever we haven't been there. And maybe our parents have had a happy marriage, you're in a happy marriage, there's no reference point to enable you to be able to have any idea what's going on. So this is to raise awareness on these issues. Ooh. One of the biggest things that I found when I started to look at this idea of the similarity between grief and loss on a divorce journey, there's the whole concept which I've talked about of what do we lose going forward? What have we thought about, going to our children's weddings, going to our children's graduations? Suddenly they become a big issue. Can I sit beside them? Will they want us both? Do I have to talk to them? All of these things. But there's a whole area in grief and loss on this journey that I think we don't hear about that often. And it's, what if I didn't get what I thought I signed up for? There are many of my clients that thought they were signing up for a happy, stable marriage with support and encouragement and all of that. And by the time they come to me, they've realized that actually they haven't had what they signed up for. And that in itself, that's a huge loss. To realize that you didn't actually have that, because what you have found is that your experience is that there's somebody that's been fighting you the whole time or has had their own agenda the whole time. That is another level of unspoken and unseen loss that's very hard to articulate to our friends. And a lot of the time, what we want to do is try and protect, and we don't want to, what's the word I would say? We don't want to overshare, and we don't want to damage the character of someone that we have been married to. But these are very real extra losses that are all unseen and hidden. And I loved this image because I thought it portrayed it really well. So in 1969, a Swiss-American psychiatrist called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote a book called Death and Dying. And one of the big things that has stood out in her book that's used the world over is that she has identified 5 stages of grief on an emotional level. So her book was on death and dying and the impact when somebody that we love is lost to us. And that is exactly what happens in a divorce journey. Someone we love is lost to us because we no longer have access to them. And also, very often, we no longer want them to have access to us. So there's this wall that goes up and we shut ourselves behind it to keep ourselves safe. But in so doing, we lock ourselves away and we make ourselves small behind this wall. So I'm a firm believer as a coach that when we understand something, we have a better ability to be able to have clearer thoughts, to not have to work so hard to make sense of something. And I think our level of acceptance of things when we understand it is much easier to come through. There's this idea of living life through ease and flow. That's not where I ever lived, ever. I had a degree in making my own life hard. And I have learned over time that sometimes when we change our questions, we change our experience of something. So the actual reality hasn't changed, but our experience of it absolutely can change. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross identified the 5 stages. So denial, this can't be happening to me. No, he can't have had an affair. No, like our marriage is solid. To anger, how dare he do that? How dare she do that? This is just not acceptable. How dare they embarrass me in front of our friends? All of this kind of thing. Depression, well, that's it. Nobody's going to love me. That I'm on my own forever. And I can't do this. I don't know how to get up in the morning. I needed them to, they were my oxygen. They were my life. The bargaining. But if I tried a bit harder, could we go to counseling? What else could we try? What if I did something that was a little bit better? Could I try a bit more? Can you give me another chance? All of these things we go through long before we get to an area that's called acceptance, which is a calmer place to be. So the curve looks lovely. It's nice and neat. It flows in an upward trajectory into hope and into something better. But the reality of life is it's like a big bowl of spaghetti that you just plop onto the middle of the table and you have no idea how to make sense of any of it because you flip-flop from one thing to the other. And I remember when I started reading about this and understanding the connection between grief and a divorce journey, it's like it just resonated. I smiled to myself at the time thinking, oh, so that's what that was. I have that t-shirt because I didn't understand it. And I didn't know that no matter what emotion I felt on this journey, it was completely normal. absolutely valid, and that there was a reason for it. Because if we don't go through these stages, we don't get to acceptance, because at some point we're going to get hooked back in. What we stuff down will always keep bobbing up. It's like when you put a light football under the water or a balloon, you use a lot of energy holding it down. You push it down. I'm not angry. I'm fine. I'm not depressed. I'm completely fine. But every so often, the weight of trying to hold it under the water just gives way and up it pops. And then you go, where did that come from? And you stuff it back down again. But it's understanding that it's okay to feel these things. In fact, it's vitally important as you journey through to become a healthy and whole person on the other side. So the biggest part about grief is that whatever somebody feels is normal. When my clients come to me, the first thing I will do is I will say, that's completely normal. And I say that a lot. That's completely normal. Because the loop questions that go on in somebody's head are, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get over this? Why am I feeling like this? Where did this come from? How could he do that? These are what I call thought loop questions that have no answer, because maybe they're not the best question you could be asking yourself. So Julia Samuel is a grief expert in England, and she's set up the Good Grief Trust. And I love listening to her. I could listen to her for hours. Her voice is so amazing. Her insight is so lived and real and gentle and compassionate. And I love this concept that she gave. And it says, grief is such a small word that is tidy. And yet everything about grief and loss is chaotic, untidy, messy, and unpredictable. And I thought, in that sentence, that describes divorce. Divorce is chaotic, it is untidy, it is messy, and it is very unpredictable, because we do not know how we're going to feel. We do not know what our ex-partner is going to do. I remember when my decree absolute came through, I thought I would feel elated. That is not how I felt. So I was unpredictable when I started to think about what it might feel like. That's not my experience. And so this level of unpredictability comes in time and again, like this left field hook that you don't see coming and catches us off guard. So I thought that was a very good description. So how we grieve can be affected by many things, because we live in a world where we have generational patterns, we have cultural patterns, we have societal patterns. So our culture and our background. Are you from a culture where if you're in South America, no, the south of America, in sort of the Bible Belt area, that culture is that everything about the Bible is right and true, and that divorce is wrong, it's evil. And we can make all sorts of Bible verses mean things. But if the culture is predominantly against something, then you feel like you're swimming upstream, or you feel like you want to stay in a corner because it's almost like I've done something wrong. What's your background? Did your parents have a divorce? How was that experience for you? How did they cope with it? Because these are things, if one of your parents fell apart, then your experience of that could be, well, I don't want to fall apart and I need to stay here. I don't feel strong enough. So our experience and our background makes a difference to how we approach something and to how we move through it. Your religious and spiritual beliefs, are you part of an active part of a church? Is there compassion and kindness in that church? Because what happens is people say one thing, but we feel something different. So they can say, oh, I can see you're really hurting, and I pray that God will give you strength. What we feel is they don't really actually believe that, because our feelings are always our truth when it comes to other people, which is why we get this confusion sometimes. What's actually going on? So what's your relationship to the person you've lost like? Was it a really good relationship where you leaned on them for everything, and they did your finances as a family, and they did your organizing, and so they organized the holidays, they organized the car to be fixed, they organized the tires to be changed, they organized things in the house to be sorted. That's a big deal when it comes to stepping out on your own, and the fear is real of how on earth do I do all of this? Was your relationship with that person very contentious? Well, that's going to affect how you grieve, because there may be a lot of anger, but you've still lost something. But to not actually see that this has an impact, I think we're missing something that's important. What are your current circumstances like? Do you have a job? Have you ever had a job? Do you have money in the bank? Do you have a second property where you could move to? All of these things are important. What's your mental health like? How do you perceive your mental health to be? A lot of this is about how we perceive our ability and capability and capacity. And I choose to put myself around people by having coaches to see in me things that I can't see. I have people around me to get me out of my own way, to say to me, you can do this. I can see you doing this. So how we perceive ourselves and how other people perceive us can very often be different things. And very often how we perceive ourselves is not in a way that's particularly kind. We tend to be more unkind to us in our thoughts than we ever would verbalize to anybody else in the open. What's your previous experience of grief? Have you lost somebody? Was it really earth-shattering? If you lost a parent when you were 10 to death, that has a really big impact on how you're going to cope with the grief of this journey. So taking all of these things into consideration really shows us that everybody's journey is different. And I have no ability to say, I know how you feel, because I have no idea. What I do know is what my experience has shown me about how I coped to give me some idea of what a feeling of loss or a feeling of anger is like. So I can identify with the emotions, but that doesn't mean I can identify with the story in the same way. And it's allowing someone to know that, to feel heard and seen without me saying, I know exactly what you mean. Because honestly, I have no idea. So pain is an interesting thing. And I loved this when I saw this, and it said pain is an agent for change. I believe in the journey that I've lived with the clients that I have worked with, that very often we need that perfect storm for change to happen. And the perfect storm is an awful place to live. I don't know if you ever saw that movie. There was a movie years ago, and it was called The Perfect Storm, and it was two storms that converged into the middle of the sea. And it's like sometimes we need all of that for real change to happen, because we don't tend to notice the things that are pain that we can cope with and we can minimize and we can place somewhere. So this forces us to adjust to this new reality. And so often it's a reality that you don't want and you didn't expect. I chose to leave my marriage, but I didn't want to. I didn't get married to want to leave. I didn't expect to ever be in a position where this would be a thing. If somebody comes to you and says, I no longer want to be married, and then you find out 3 months later they're having an affair, you didn't want it, you didn't expect it, that is a problem. So pain is such a multifaceted thing, but in my experience and understanding, pain is always part of a divorce journey, and it does create an agent for change. It's what we do with pain that creates our reality going forward. So when pain is turned in, excuse me, when pain is turned inwards, it looks like guilt. Why didn't I do that? If only I'd done that. I should have done this. I feel so badly that this has happened. I feel so badly that my children are not going to live in a family of 4 anymore. I feel so badly that my mother-in-law is upset. So guilt is a real thing, but that is pain turned inwards. Regret. What if I had done more counseling? What if I had done more work on myself? What if I did more around the house? What if I'd gotten a job and had an income that I could bring to the family? This is all what it looks like to have pain that is turned inward, and it is not helpful to allow you to move forward. It is a coping strategy. It's just not a very helpful one. Other unhelpful coping strategies are when pain is avoided. It can look like overindulging in alcohol, using food as a comfort blanket, or not eating. And that's very often because it's something we can control when we feel like the rest of our world is out of control. Gambling. You can become a workaholic and you can work 24/7 as an avoidance tactic. You can become more interested in sex. And again, it's an avoidance tactic that actually causes so much more hurt and damage. Or you can go from one relationship to another and they can be destructive. It is a tactic, it is a strategy, but it is what we do when we want to avoid pain. And I think you can guess from all of the things I've listed, not the most helpful at all for moving forward. But we can't change what we don't recognize. So having awareness is the first start of change. The first starting point is seeing something for what it actually is rather than what you think it is. That gives something to work with. So support, it has different faces. all of which have the aim of helping somebody to feel that they are safe. Safety is something that we feel more than we hear. Because as I've said earlier, there's what you hear somebody say, and there's what you feel. And when there's a disconnect, I would usually go, what you feel is your truth. So what are you feeling? So if you know somebody who's on a divorce journey, whether it's a work colleague or a friend or a sibling or a cousin or anybody in your world, asking them, how can I help, is a really empowering question. Saying to someone, if you need anything, give me a ring. I had lots of people who said to me, if I can help in any way, if you need anything, just give me a shout. I had no idea what I needed. I didn't understand that my coping strategy was this, almost like this hyper independence. And I remember someone that I know said to me a while back, we were having a conversation, and she said, but I thought you were fine because, you looked fine. You came across as fine. I was so good at having a mask, at making everything fine, that I didn't know how to translate that to say to other people, or to even give an impression that I wasn't fine. And there is this concept that says, just because you do the leaving, you must be okay. Sure, you wanted it, didn't you? And as someone who's done that, I can testify that's completely not true. It's just a different set of emotions at a different time. And I would have been further on in the journey than my ex-husband, but that didn't mean it wasn't the same journey. Saying nothing, that is one of the most powerful things that you can do to support someone. You can go out for a coffee or a walk and you can just say nothing, because so often we try and think of what's a good thing to say, what's the right thing to say. And sometimes saying nothing allows somebody else to think. When we feel safe, our brains can think better. And as a coach, what I do is I provide a safe and non-judgmental space for my clients to think better than they can think on their own. And that is a very powerful thing to give somebody. Listening to understand. So often we listen and we're just about to butt in because our parents did this, or we know someone who did that, and it's well-meaning and it's really well intended. But it means you're not listening to understand. It means you're listening to answer. And that's not always necessarily the most helpful. It is helpful, but it's not the most helpful. Can you offer practical help? So rather than saying to someone, let me know if I can help you. When I had my two boys, I had friends who said, can I take the kids to the park for the afternoon for you? And that was a godsend, because I didn't know I needed the space. But when I got it, it was great. Or can I babysit? Or do you know what? I'm cooking a big thing of bolognese tonight, so I'm going to drop you around some in the morning, and you can either freeze it or use it. You have the choice, but I'm just letting you know, because if it would help and you didn't want to cook dinner tomorrow night, this might be something, and I would love to do something. We disempower people when we don't let them help us. And those were the kind of things, when I look back, honestly, I felt like I had won the lottery when I had that. When I got the flu one time, a friend of mine rang me and said, can I get you some shopping? She dropped around a box and it had all sorts of stuff that I needed, like milk and a few things, but she also had extra things in, and she had coloring books and crayons for the boys. Those are the things that make a massive difference when somebody's on a divorce journey. Can you signpost them if you think they're really struggling? Can you signpost them to their GP? Could you signpost them to a solicitor? Signpost them to a divorce coach? This is really empowering and helpful. Asking them, would they like you to attend an appointment with them? I didn't know the difference of taking somebody with me to see my solicitor for the first time. I didn't know what that would mean. And my friend offered, and I said yes. But it meant when we went out for coffee afterwards, I wasn't trying to remember everything. And when I said, oh, I think she said this, my friend was able to go, actually, that's not what she said. So that's a really, really empowering thing you can give to someone when they don't know they need it. But it's huge. So you're giving your time, you're giving your presence, you're giving the ability to unpack it in a safe space afterwards. That is worth gold. When you text them for no reason and you just ask, hi, how you doing? I was thinking of you, just checking in. Just that allows somebody to feel seen and heard. Now, you're going to laugh. I can't actually see the bottom bit there. Asking, can somebody unmute and help me out? Actually, hold on, I can do it this way. Oh yes, asking, not presuming. So asking, not presuming is my friend who said to me, I just presumed you were fine. When we presume, we so very often get it wrong. I remember when I started my training as a student nurse, we were told within our first 6 weeks of training, never presume because you're going to get it wrong and that can cost somebody their life. So I don't presume. I ask, I check, I verify. I could ring someone up and go, just checking. I think you might be okay, but I'm not sure. Can you help me out? Something simple, non-defensive to just check and see. So there are 8 pillars of strength that have been recognized that Julius Samuel also talks about. And these are how to rebuild. And this is the bit that we build around us to create this new life. And Sally really touched on this when she talked about it in her presentation. So the relationship we have with ourselves is so important. And it's something I bring to all my clients. And we start with, who are you? Let's frame you up with this, because if you don't have a good relationship with yourself, you're not able to connect to other people in the future. And you're not able to communicate well because you don't know what your needs are. So it's a vital part. And actually, for a lot of my clients, and I would say for me too, it gave me a chance to rediscover who I was, because I wasn't quite sure. And honestly, my world was very grey and I had faded away. A marriage doesn't just end, it is a slow fade. And in the slow fading, we fade with it, not just the connection between two people. So finding that and rediscovering that's really important. Knowing that it's safe to express your emotions. Every emotion has something to tell us. There are no negative emotions in my book. There are just emotions, all with this little flag going, hello, I'm here. Can I tell you something? Because when we listen to our emotions, it dials down the intensity and they can feel, oh, I've done my job. I don't need to do this anymore. So we can let them go. They reduce in intensity. Time. We all have expectations of, well, in a year's time, I'll be divorced and I'll be fine. Life is not like that. Life is not very organized. It is completely messy. So holding our expectations of time loose. There is no time where you can say in a year and a half on a divorce journey, you'll be fine. It doesn't work like that. And we can set ourselves up for failure and fall if we expect our friends to be okay after a certain length of time, or we expect ourselves to be okay. Our mind and body. What do we need to give ourselves to allow ourselves to rebuild? So that's sleep and hydration and proper food and connection with people. It's all of these things. Look at our limits. Look at our capacity. We don't have capacity to take on the world when we're dealing with all of this. And hopefully, as this presentation has gone on, you have seen that actually there is a limit. So saying no is a really important part of actually being healthy. Structure and routine is vital. Having a reason to get up in the morning, putting in structure for a walk, to get exercise, to move the emotions and to increase our dopamine every day is important. What we focus on matters. Things that we focus on grow bigger and bigger. And if we are focusing on he said, he did all the time, that's not helping us to move forward. So they're not the best questions. So I go back to that question that I ask my clients to put in the notes in their phone. Is this in my best interest? When you have those thought processes, is this in my best interest? Kind of cuts through the noise and gets you where you need to be. And our relationship with others. It comes way after our relationship with ourselves. But a lot of that is, how do I learn to connect in a way that is better for me? So why is the awareness of this information about grief so valuable? Well, it allows somebody to understand that whatever they're feeling is normal. So that question of what's wrong with me, where we beat ourselves up, is allowed to die down. It gives the ability to preempt and recognize patterns and to have coping strategies. So if you know that depression is part of this journey and you get up in the morning and you feel that black cloud, have you got anything in place where actually you might think, being on my own today is not a great idea. I know that that's not going to go somewhere good. Who do I know that I can see? Or can I go to a coffee shop just to be around people, even if I don't go with a friend? It gives us the ability to manage what's coming down the road better. There was a belief in the past that people think that on a grief journey, that it gets smaller over time. Where in actual fact now, thinking is, grief stays the same, but what happens is we build our lives around it. And there's a visual that I saw the other day, but I couldn't link it to this. And it was this sense of you have a birthday or anniversary, or a wedding anniversary or something, and the expansive world that we've had shrinks back down to the size of the grief because the grief becomes more real on those days. But then over the next number of days, we grow back into the expansive new world that we have. And we have this feeling of, okay, I can cope again. So understanding that grief stays the same, but we build and expand our lives around it, I think is really, really helpful. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'm going to share my next screen. This is my QR code that has all the access to my social media, my phone number, my email. So if you'd like to take a screenshot of it or to click onto it with the camera of your phone, I'll leave it up for a second. And then I'm going to change to the gallery view. But if anybody has any comments or anything that they'd like to say or to ask questions, please feel free to do so. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you find this helpful and beneficial, and I hope you find it helpful if anybody else that you know is going through a divorce journey, because hopefully this will give you a different sense of what their world might be like and how you can actually help. Because the feeling of not knowing how to help is really, it's a really uncomfortable feeling. Thanks, Mel.
Anyone got any questions or observations?
No question, just not a question, just an observation. Always insightful, always informative, expertly delivered, and very interesting. So thanks, Claire.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Tom.
Yeah, I'd like to say I love the spaghetti on the plate. Very relatable.
Isn't it?
Wonderful. Yeah. Thanks, Claire.
You're welcome. And that's what we bring as coaches. We bring the ability to help the spaghetti to be separated out. And having done 20 years as an A&E manager, I know how to prioritize and organize. And that's the thing. When I'm in the middle of my mess, I have my coaches to help me. We all need people. It's not a weakness. It's very definitely a strength to bring people into our lives to help us to unravel the stuff that we've just got knotted up. When it stays in here, it just gets into a mess.
True.